Dara O'Shea from West Brom.
Dara O'Shea. Honestly,
Yeah, I think
I
he's.
don't know who that is because any player with either of those names in my mind is just like someone who used to be average about 10 years ago and now plays in the
No,
Championship.
he's. I mean, I don't know much about him, but he's their captain. I think he's all right. He's like 24.
Okay.
Bit
Centre
gutting for
back.
West Brom, to be fair. Yeah, yeah,
Burnley going back to Burnley roots.
yeah. In it, yeah,
Company's not happy. Um,
yeah. The board are thinking, no, we don't like attractive football.
well,
We
I
won't
mean,
have
to
it.
be fair, it's smart for the first season in the Prem.
Yeah, they got to be a bit pragmatic for sure. He's got good stats.
Oh yeah.
He's quite good passer.
Is this FB?
Yeah, a lot of passes attempted. Quite a few progressive passes, touches. Seems good.
Fair enough. So he could be well suited to both styles of football, despite his name.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine even though they are probably going to be a bit more pragmatic, they're not going to be completely abandoning their principles. Like they will want defenders that can play.
Yeah, they're not going to go sort of Sean Dyche in and out.
No, they're not going full on hoofball all of a sudden.
Hoofball.
Hoofball.
Yeah, no, I'd quite like to see what they do. I don't think they'll beat City on the first day. But
No.
City, they tend to start a little slowly sometimes.
Yeah, they take a while to warm up, don't they? Could be a shock. Are they at home or away?
I think they're
Do you know?
away. So they might get a draw.
They could. Yeah, I would not be surprised, to be fair, if they got a result. I expect City will probably win, but I could see the Burnley Vincent Kompany masterclass. It'd be good for the.
I think he'll be a little
narrative.
out of his depth to begin with, and he'll figure his feet out maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe like December, January, and then he'll start to pick up. He'll do a Bournemouth maybe.
Maybe, or an Aston Villa 2-3 years ago, because we were nearly down until there was the break for COVID, and then was it like our
No,
last?
but we finished 11th that season, I'm sure.
No, the year before that when we just stayed up. The first year we came up from the Premier League, from the Championship.
when that deflected goal away at West Ham nearly crushed our dreams.
Yeah. Like we started that season kind of badly, really. We were in the relegation zone most of the season, I think, and then at some point it kind of clicked. We tried loads of different systems. We've tried playing three at the back with Bjorn Engels. But we played Samata up front. Remember him?
Oh God! Didn't he only score us one goal?
Yeah, he scored in the League Cup
Chelsea.
final. We got to the League Cup final that year as well. And he scored in that game against City. We lost 3-1, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think
But
that's
yeah,
the
we
one.
almost got relegated. Got to the League Cup final where Samata scored his only goal. Pretty wacky season, but we got it together eventually. It does take teams, especially when you have to buy loads of players and rebuild. Like Forest looked pretty shaky all the way through the season, but they ended fairly comfortably, really, because they obviously had a big rebuild and bought a load of players, but it kind of clicked at some point. So yeah, I can see a similar thing with Burnley, but I think company will figure it out. It seems like he's a good manager, so
Yeah, I still think they'll just about finish out of the relegation zone in that sort of
yeah, it's not going to be
17th,
like
16th kind of zone.
going to be a mid-table season, I imagine, but
Yeah, but we already did our predictions. We don't want to
We
get
did.
too much into predictions.
we did.
So what do you make of? Well, there's a lot of Villa to catch up on, isn't there? So should we?
There is.
should
There's
we
been a
get
bit of
through-
stuff.
Should we get through the Villa? to
Yeah,
start with?
might as well get out of the way.
Okay, let's do a few easy bits. Transfers, like ones that aren't happening. Nico Williams, probably
Yeah.
not happening anymore.
No, it's hard to know what to believe of all this stuff, isn't it? Really.
I know you
but-
wanted him in your rebuild, didn't you?
Yeah, he would have
Cocktail
been
as well.
one of my first choices. To be fair.
Yeah.
Um,
Cockchew's now at Benfica, so he's off the.
oh really?
Yeah.
Didn't see that. Oh shit.
So that's
Yeah, I
off.
would have liked him as well. But I mean, we got Tielemans, who's probably a similar kind of role to Kochku. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy with Tielemans.
PSG are after Lee Kang.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. That kind of surprised me. That's actually
Well,
smart business. It's not like a random big. It's like kind of a
yeah.
low key
Of
signing.
all the attackers we were linked with, I think he was in the top two probably or three that I wanted. I was like, he
Yeah,
is with the right direction and the right sort of development, he could become such a good player.
yeah.
Um,
And he's got a really low release clause as well, hasn't he? So it's kind of a
yeah, as
no-brainer.
well. It is.
Oh well. Yeah. What else is there?
Well, so we've had the appointment of Munchie.
Yeah.
What are your
It's very
thoughts? What are your thoughts?
well. Hard to criticize it really. It's hard to see where it'll go wrong, and apart from the fact that he had a sort of unsuccessful stint at Roma. Um,
He's come out and addressed that though. He's kind of said, I didn't really understand the club, the fans, the way it connected, how they thought
yeah.
about the club, what the kind of idea of people's idea of the club was.
Right.
He tried to come in and be a little too smart, be a little too conservative with the way he sold players and bought players in, and tried to shape the club.
Hmm.
I don't know if he said that exactly, but I feel like that's what he was getting at. And so he
Yeah.
recognised his mistake there and looks to improve from that. So I
Yeah.
think
Seems
that
smart.
might be a good kind of indication of where he might try and change things with the way he comes to and works at Villa. Because obviously Sevilla just don't have a lot of money, full stop. Um, and a lot of Spanish clubs are like that. They like bringing in those cheap players, keeping a good
Yeah.
Spanish core and things like that. So doing that in Spain worked very well, and to an extent it could work in other countries, but then you do have to kind of take into account, as he was saying, like the way the fans identify with the club, what they think the club is, what it means to people. Um, you wouldn't want to see
Yeah.
him come in at, for example, like if he came in at Chelsea and started trying to do the same sort of things, he'd be out within a month. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's like maybe one of the concerns you could have is that he's basically only ever worked at Sevilla. Um, so you know, there might be a bit of a bedding in period where it takes him a while to understand the club and work in a different way because, he's only got experience of one club. He's not, how some people, when they've worked at loads of different places, they're adaptable. They know what to expect when they're changing cultures and stuff.
or they just at
Um,
least they don't maybe know what to expect, but they know
they know how to
how
deal
to
with it.
adapt. They
Yeah.
know how to sort of
Yeah.
seamlessly
So
fit in.
that might be a concern. Might take him maybe longer than we expect to kind of start being successful. There might maybe a few early misses or something, or maybe it'll take him longer to get transfers through than he hoped. But I don't know. Maybe apart from the kind of adaptability thing, it's hard to really it's hard to pull it apart really because he's obviously been so successful at Sevilla and in a good way as well. In a way that, like you say, connected with the fans, kept a Spanish core of players at Sevilla, and bought players young and cheap and increased their value. Like it's just positive, sustainable. Yeah, seems
Yeah,
seems like a bloody good appointment to me.
yeah. As well, if you were making, to sort of be devil's advocate, if you like, if you're making the point about him only ever working at Sevilla, it genuinely is only at Sevilla, unless like ignoring Roma, obviously, because he wasn't director of football before that. I think, he had a fairly average career as a second string goalkeeper for the most part
Yeah,
in professional football. I can't remember exactly what he did upon leaving football, but then soon after, within a few years or possibly within a few months, Sevilla essentially had a bit of a palaver. Their director of football wasn't cutting it, so they just gave him the opportunity. And he took a few years to get them going, but once he did, then he really started to see success and has just built from there. So, in a way, his kind of education on how to be a director of football and everything he's experienced from it, other than at Roma, has just come from that journey at Sevilla. So if you were erring on the side of caution in terms of your expectations for him, that wouldn't be the sort of best indicator of what's going to happen. But again,
yeah,
like we spoke about with the experience at Roma, I think that will play a part. And also coming into a club where Emery's already been and connected so well with the fans and understands the club and what we want from the club, what he wants for the club, what the board want for the club. I think he'll, and his pre-existing relationship with Monchi, I think he'll translate that really well. And I think
Yeah, that's the
he'll
thing, is
see
that
us as
Emery
a team.
has obviously understood the club really well. He emphasises the importance of the fans massively. Like the first thing he says in every post-match conference is thanks to the fans, etc. Um, and so yeah, the fact that he's got a good pre-existing relationship um, will help the sort of adaptability issue, if it even is an issue. So yeah, I'm not really concerned about that. But I guess if you were being cautious about it, if you were trying to not get carried away, then that might be something you were thinking about. But I don't really have any concerns. I mean, seems
Yeah,
like a bit of a coup, really, kind of like
yeah.
Emery.
Well, we have a big directorate sort of team now. We've got I can't remember all the names of the players, not players as in football players, but the players within that directors team.
Yeah, yeah,
You've got Chris Heck, who's I'm pretty sure it's head of business operations
yeah. Sort of
or
global
global
businessy
business
stuff.
operations. You've got Jan Lang is still about. I was surprised about. He's head of global
Yeah, I've
football
read that he's
operations.
taking more of an international role on player development. So he'll be managing the academies for different teams. I
Senegal,
think. Yeah,
Egypt.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, he kind of doing a similar job where he's scouting young talent. But I think I've read that it'll be more of an international kind of
I could see
role.
that being really successful as well because what you have in those situations at the moment is you have various assets in terms of clubs and academies across the world, but what you perhaps maybe don't have is very high level people in place to bring those clubs and those academies up to the level where they're producing talent that could play for Villa one day.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, having because I think part of it is sending people to those countries and saying you're going to be based here and you're going to work on this academy, etc. But having someone who's still based with the main club but works out of Birmingham, I'd expect, but essentially gets to travel all over the world doing his job. I think it gives them. It's quite an attractive proposal. You still get to do what you want to do. Maybe you don't get to choose transfers at the highest level, but you're developing players and you're very much within the fabric of
yeah,
the football club and the group, and you get to travel around doing that.
yeah.
So
It's like the clear connection between those academies worldwide and Aston Villa is quite an um, interesting proposal. If you're working with an academy with the knowledge that it's very closely linked to significant people at the club, then it gives you a kind of added incentive to develop those players, seek out those talents with the knowledge that there's a close link to Villa, there's a potential transfer to Aston Villa. It's not just
yeah,
you're not developing players and then you're thinking, well, they could get a transfer anywhere in the world. There's kind of a direct route.
yeah, I'm
Um,
especially excited about the link with that Senegalese academy because obviously we've got this connection with Victoria, which we can speak about the investigations as well. Um, but we've got that link, and there'll obviously be some good players there, but they're already relatively developed probably by the time they would move to us, if we even, uh,
yeah,
take any players from them. But with that
yeah,
Senegalese academy, the word academy suggests it is purely about developing youth talent, and Senegal is one of the best, if not the best, footballing country in Africa at the moment. They've just
yeah,
beaten Brazil 4-2, albeit in a friendly. There's, there's clearly talent to be brought out of Senegal. So if we can create a big academy there
mm,
with almost purely the, I wouldn't say purely, but the main objective being find talent to bring to the Premier League
yeah,
on the cheap to play a part for Villa. Obviously, they'll still have an opportunity at other clubs, and there'll be other pathways for them. It's not going to be purely like Fulham
yeah,
or broke, but having that sort of avenue, as well as
yeah.
the
It's
undersized
definitely
clubs in
definitely
Birmingham,
exciting.
is going to
I mean, I
and
think
academies in
it's
Birmingham.
just that Africa's got a lot of potential. Obviously, as a footballing nation, like it's a massive place and it loves football. Um, I just said nation. I'm stupid. Africa's not a nation. Um, but I don't know. It's kind of confusing how so much of the focus seems to be on Europe and South America, and I suppose they're just places with massive heritage and football. whatever. But maybe it's cost. I don't know. It seems like Africa should be a place that clubs are already doing a lot of work on, and clearly they are because Mo Salah plays for Liverpool, and a lot of players already come out of Africa and play for top teams. But I don't know. Maybe it's cost. Maybe like we're a few years into the project now. The owners are thinking we seem quite established in the Premier League, so we want to expand, and then maybe setting up a scouting network in Europe for most clubs is achievable, but there's only maybe a few clubs can afford to properly establish a network in Africa, and so maybe that's
Potentially, yeah. I think it has been going on for a while. I'm pretty sure Chelsea do have some academies in Africa somewhere.
yeah. Well, this is the thing. I'm
Um,
thinking it must be, you know, maybe it's a cost thing that stops every club um,
Perhaps.
scout players in
I think the
Africa.
main reason we don't see more African players, not that there aren't plenty, but should be more. But the reason we don't see as many is maybe South America, or I mean, to an extent, maybe even Asia, you might say, because Japanese, Korean footballers are quite prominent now. So would you say? I don't know, would you say there are more African or Asian footballers in like European leagues?
African, yeah,
Yeah.
African by far.
So yeah, they're not exactly the like least well represented, but a
No,
lot of obviously a lot of the talent in Africa doesn't get the exposure that it might get in other countries because even the sort of in the top Chinese league you know about it. You possibly even know some of the teams and some of the players there.
yeah, and then
Top
J League as well.
Japanese, yeah, top,
Yeah,
yeah, even like obviously Saudi Arabia. Is, I don't even know
well,
what to say about that,
let's not talk about that. Somebody else.
but that's becoming a thing now. Um,
Yeah, yeah, like J League. People have heard of the J League. They probably
yeah,
know the main teams in the J League. You hear of players coming out of it. Africa, you hear of players coming out of Africa. You don't hear where they come from. You don't know about the teams. You don't know about the leagues.
yeah, it
Um,
just doesn't have the same exposure. So the
no,
more we can develop players uh, in Africa and give them opportunities to play football regularly in places where they'll get more exposure and maybe even potentially help develop local leagues because that's what we should do as well. If we're going to
yeah,
set up
definitely.
academies there and
Yeah,
bring players in, there should be a caveat with that where you're also investing in the local football
yeah,
system, in the national leagues, things like that, because you can't just
yeah.
go over there, set up your own little
No, you
academy,
don't just want
take
to
all their best
pillage it.
talent, and
No.
essentially continue to sap that country's ability to grow its footballing presence around the
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
Because while that might be, maybe it's legal, maybe it's good for your club, etc. It's not like imagine you're a local in Senegal and
I know you'd
you
be
have
so
a
pissed
team
off.
out there
If it was-
and all
Yeah,
your best academy players that could go into your first team and help that team perform well and maybe move on at a later date just get snapped up by this academy and never even make it to the clubs.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, we definitely should be doing that kind of thing. I mean, I'd imagine that. I mean, you'd hope there's sort of regulations and stuff, but maybe in Africa there's not. I don't know whether like
Yeah,
because a lot of places in Africa are quite unstable, so you don't know how strict the regulations are, how well they're enforced, and stuff like that.
yeah, they're still
Um,
developing.
yeah,
There's a lot to consider, but if we let's take this back to sort of Villa for a moment and how we're talking about that team of directors and the owners and all the roles they have to play. I heard today as well as a bit of a weird announcement. So we've just had the new kits out. Obviously, the new sponsors,
yeah,
kit sponsors, have been announced, um, sort of officially. Apparently, I don't know if this is absolutely 100% correct, but I'm fairly certain it's the case. The new crest is only for the kit. It's not going to be on
yeah, yeah,
socials. I don't know if it'll be on the Premier League table. It won't be around the stadium.
yeah,
So, and obviously, um, what's his name? Christian Perslow was a huge advocate for the change of kits and the change of badge.
hmm
Do we think there's been a little bit of unrest with that decision behind the scenes, and now Perslow's
yeah. I
gone,
hadn't
some
thought
other
about that
folks have
actually.
gone, and actually they're looking to maintain perhaps the branding or maybe they're still looking at a change of branding, but not quite the way it was sort of portrayed under Perslow.
Maybe. I hadn't thought about that because I read the same thing about the fact that the new crest is just being used on the kit. I've got it now. So yeah, it's just being used on the kit, and the existing badge will remain visible around the stadium across the club's digital channels and in other areas. So that's presumably in Premier League tables and stuff as well. Um, and it says that, I mean, all it says about it is what it says. So the part of the new crest is that it's a kind of a homage to the 1982 badge when we won the European Cup
Yeah.
because it's similar shape, blah blah. Um, so that's why it's yeah. So it's paying tribute to that, and it says Villa will monitor local, national, and global reaction along with feedback to the use of both crests.
Okay.
Um, and that the club plans to further engage with supporters on the future identity of Villa. So to me, it seems like they're trialing it basically,
Yeah.
and then they're going to see what the reaction is to using both, whether people like the use of both, whether people rather just replace. I mean, it would seem weird to have two kind
But
of.
do you think that's actually the case, or do you think that's just sort of the explanation they're giving as a result of them basically throwing their toys out the pram now?
Yeah.
Perslow's come
So
and going, actually, I don't like any of this. Why are we doing this? Well, we've already
um,
designed this new kit and it's coming out, so let's just come up with a backstory as to why it's going to be
could be.
different.
So you reckon they're just going to use it this year because all the plans are already in place, and then sack it off again next year, basically.
Sack it
Say they would.
off, change it to
Yeah.
something different. I don't know, but do you think that?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I could imagine it being true because say Chris Heck has come in. He's the global brand guy.
Yeah,
Um, he's going to want to put his own stamp on branding, isn't he? He's going to have his own ideas, and the badge things seem to be heavily pushed by Perslow. So you've got one guy in charge of branding and business has this new crest, and then suddenly there's a new guy who is in charge of branding and business. He's obviously going to have his own ideas. So um, yeah, I could see it being true, but I mean, a lot of work went into the new crest. Like there was a lot of asking supporters what they wanted and meetings with supporter groups and stuff. I can't imagine
it was all led
they're
by
gonna
Perslow, though. That's the thing. All
undo it
Perslow.
all. Yeah, um, I don't know. It's actually difficult. It is quite
Yeah,
strange.
unless
It's
you know,
a
it's hard
strange
to
one.
speculate as to why.
It is interesting because it is a really strange statement to put out
I
to
think it
be like
could
a
be the
bit excited
case.
about this new badge and then also we're using the old one and some stuff.
Yeah, it's going to
Um,
be a very unusual situation because I don't think any team has ever done that before.
no,
So it
it's
looks very
weird.
messy. And if you're talking about a club that's, working its way up in the right direction, and especially a very well-run club, say like Brighton, you wouldn't have this sudden exit of Perslow, sudden influx of new management, kind of like you would with a manager switch. There would be, a contract ending, and things would slowly
Yeah.
transition. All these things would be pre-planned. There wouldn't be seemingly any friction or confusion. So the fact that there is, while there's all this new change, could mean there is a little bit of unrest at the higher levels. Maybe it's not quite working. Obviously, it's only just started. I'm not saying things are going to fall apart, but maybe things aren't going as smoothly as they should have. Maybe this hasn't been planned
Mm.
and premeditated the way
Yeah, that's a
it
good point actually.
could have been if it was run a little better.
Yeah, I think maybe so what's happened is Chris Heck has come in, and he's not really had time to he's only just started in his job. If he hasn't even started yet,
Yeah,
he's not really had time to put any of his own ideas in place. This new badge has already been announced that it's going to be on the kit. But like you say, maybe the club with the new structure is not fully behind it because it was Perslow's whole thing. Um, and so yeah, maybe they've stuck with it for the kit, but they've said I think maybe it seems like the Perslow change wasn't planned. Uh, some kind of fallout maybe. They rushed the new guy in, but he didn't have time to really change anything this season in terms of branding. So it seems like they're they're just saying that this year's branding could all change next year. We don't really know.
yeah.
So yeah, it does maybe suggest something was unplanned, because I think if they were kind of anticipating bringing in a new branding guy, they would have done it earlier, where he had a chance to have some influence on this season's kit, badge, crest, whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was announced a good while before Perslow left, but you would have thought if that was the whole plan, then there would have been more that came out about that, or the change would have been
Yeah,
made
I mean
sooner where
it's
Perslow
quite a
left and he came
significant
in.
structural change, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
quite
because you're going from one
quite a big
CEO
change.
with one director of football below him that doesn't seem to actually have that much power or control from the outside, and then a manager that seems to be held in higher regard than this director of
Yeah,
football, Johan
yeah,
Lander,
yeah,
to all of a sudden now you've got this widespread board almost of directors that all have different roles, which is
yeah.
probably a better way to do it, and it's probably come
I
from
think
the
so.
owners.
Yeah,
But and you know, maybe long term we'll be sat back laughing at this conversation, thinking, "Oh, how stupid were we to think this was going to be a problem, or that it could even be the sign of
yeah,
maybe something not going as smoothly as it could." But it still doesn't mean that it couldn't come with its issues, that it couldn't
yeah.
be.
I think it's a better way of doing things, and I think it will be fine. It will be a better structure. I think the only thing this all this kind of suggests is that there was a massive structural change. It didn't really go as smoothly as planned, and so maybe they didn't get their branding guy in as quickly as they wanted. Maybe they didn't expect Perslow to leave. Something a bit unexpected happened, so they basically said that this year, in terms of branding of the club, we're just going to leave it, and the like sort of major changes are going to happen next year, kind of thing.
I
Um,
think that's more likely because we're going to see the development of the stadium this year as well. I
yeah,
don't know. I think it's planned to finish 2025, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know
that seems
exactly. I
fantastic.
feel like they'll probably go stadium first, commercial part later, or it could be the other
Yeah,
way, depending on what's easier to implement. Because if you're trying to implement the stadium first, you've got a pre-existing structure, you're just adding to it. Maybe that's harder to do. I don't know. I'm not a builder. I can't tell you that. But then what I understand is for the new sort of box park like entertainment and retail centre, they are
yeah,
just getting rid of what was there before and completely building from fresh. So
yeah,
it could be one part then the next, and it goes okay, stadium rebuild first, new kit, new badge, etc. At the end of next season, new villa sort of thing, and then we get this new retail park. It could be something like that. So perhaps that could work fairly nicely. Another thing I was gonna mention is we have had those plans knocked back slightly, apparently due to transport concerns
yeah. I
and
read that. Yeah,
station.
yeah. So I think this has always been a bit of a concern. Whenever I read about stadium expansion, basically the only thing that seems to get in the way is the fact that if the stadium, I mean, the train stations already can't deal with the capacity of the stadium. Um, and so if the stadium is expanded, it's just going to make that problem worse. And so I think the club been has been trying to find a solution with, I guess, Birmingham City Council or something.
Well, I thought they
Um,
had. Because do you remember
yeah,
hearing
it
about that
seems like they had.
Sky
Yeah.
Rail thing that was going to be elevated so far off the city streets and would take you straight from New Street to
Whoa,
the stadium?
I don't remember that.
No,
I don't remember that, but
that was
I remember
included
there
in their
being a
plans.
solution
Yeah,
because
that was included.
right, yeah, because they couldn't expand the stadium without dealing with the increased capacity that it's going to put on the train stations, because it's already doesn't work. Um, so I thought when they announced that the plans are happening, I just assumed that there was a solution.
Well,
Um,
that was it, but I don't know what's happened to that. If that's not good
right.
enough anymore, whether that system is going to
I
interfere with
mean,
Witten Station, because it
local
was
councils are
specifically Witten
just
they
bad, aren't they?
talked about. Yeah, it
It's
could be the
just
case.
yeah.
So
I think it's just a hard thing to do, to coordinate a massive project like that with a local council that's usually sort of underfunded and disorganized and stuff like that. So,
overworked. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I feel like with something like this, relative to how long things usually take with councils, it will get sorted relatively quickly. But
yeah.
the longer
If
it
the
is
plan's
pushed
already in
back,
place and the funding's there and stuff, I can't imagine they're going to stall it. Because for the council, they'll want it to get done because it will be increased money for them and stuff. Like, they will want it to happen. And as long as the plans are there and the money's there, they'll find a way of working out. I guess it's just
Yeah,
maybe set the time back a little bit, but I don't think it'll be a problem.
yeah. Hopefully that is the case. And I suppose last couple of things on Villa, the examination into our relationship with Vittoria. Um, Apparently, it won't be an issue though, because obviously we're in the same competition this year. So every
Oh right,
time
yeah, yeah,
multi-club ownership has a sort of conflict of interest there has to be an investigation. But supposedly, Vittoria's president came out and basically said this won't be an issue. It's been discussed already. Um, other teams have had majority ownerships, and
yeah.
they're
I
still
read the
aware
same thing. Yeah,
around the rules. God, I've got a lisp or something apparently.
rules.
Around the rules. So yeah, apparently it's not going to be an issue, especially because we have minority ownership. I say we, V Sports have minority ownership.
We,
Um,
me and you.
yeah, and then as well, they also mention if the rules were to change, we would change the relationship in accordance. So
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I'm
They're
nothing
not going to
something to
buy a
worry
club
about,
without
but
thinking about it, are they? So,
yeah,
um,
could brush that news over.
yeah, I don't think it'll be a problem. I think like I read the same thing, and the telling thing was that it was the president of Victoria saying all this, wasn't it?
Mm,
And yeah, if it becomes a problem, they'll just rework out the agreement, won't they? Like, yeah,
yeah,
I don't
that's
think they would have spent loads of money buying a football club without thinking.
no,
Um,
absolutely not.
yeah, so I feel like that's probably it. Doesn't seem like there's any concrete transfer stuff happening. It's all a bit up in the air. Torres, I would
Increasingly
still,
linked to Torres, yeah.
yeah, I'd still be really keen on it. It seems like we're still interested, but Bayern Munich are also apparently interested.
Yeah, I
So,
think apparently it hinges on the player himself deciding if he wants to leave Villarreal. As soon
mm,
as he decides whether he wants to leave Villarreal, that's when we'll start to hear more.
yeah. Do you
Um,
think you would take
I
Villa over Bayern Munich? Say if Bayern were interested.
I think if it's at the start of the season, start of the transfer window, if you go back like 2 weeks, whatever it is, and you've got Bayern want a centre back, we want a centre back, he wants to leave Villarreal, I think he goes to Bayern. I think by the time he decides if that is the case in what we're waiting for, um, Bayern may well have signed Kim Min Jae. If they sign Kim Min Jae and don't lose Lucas Hernandez,
Yeah,
or they maybe just signing Kim Min Jae in and of itself will price them out of going in for Pau Torres because they still want a DM. I think they still want a striker. I
yeah,
think then that leaves the door open for us to sign him.
yeah. And I
But
think for Bayern, for us, Torres seems to be a major priority signing.
yeah,
For Bayern, he won't be a priority signing. They're probably going to go after other positions at the same time. We can rush the signing through. If he decides he wants to leave Villarreal, we can be straight in, like we want you right now. Bayern might deliberate on that a bit, and he might want the stability.
yeah,
And also, like say, if Bayern are thinking of signing another centre back, he's in the peak of his career. He's worked with Emery before. He might not want to risk sitting on the bench at Bayern, but
yeah,
I mean, players do, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But I mean, he'd at least the one probably the only advantage of going to Villa is guaranteed playtime
yeah.
and working with Emery. But
I think as well. I think the relationship between Villarreal and Bayern, and as far as Pau Torres is concerned, is they offered him to Bayern. I don't know if they were
right,
necessarily pursuing him already. I
okay,
think they offered his agent offered him, or the club offered him. Um, just I don't know, maybe trying to get the fee, whatever it is.
yeah,
Probably the agent. I'm not sure. Um, but if he himself hasn't decided yet, then that doesn't really say much at all on either side.
no, yeah,
Um, as well, what we could see, depending on how long all this takes, is if City sell Laporte and they can't bring in
mm,
Gvardiol because of price, or whether he just wants to leave or not at this stage, maybe they go for someone like Pau Torres. He's just like the profile that Diaz and Laporte were when they signed them. he's a ball playing, tall centre back, Spanish speaking, Portuguese, that kind of area.
Yeah,
It would scream Man City.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
as the kind of signing they'd go out and make, especially for
yeah.
30 million. Certainly not a bad fee for a player of that uh, level in
No,
this market.
no.
But they haven't expressed interest at the moment. That is just basically adding two and two together. So I think we're in a good spot compared to
Yeah, I think so.
where we were with, say, Nico Williams or other players like Ken Coach, who basically had everyone in Europe to pick from.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think it's kind of his appeal to us is quite unique with Emery, basically, isn't it? He seems to be our number one centre back target, and he's worked under Emery before. He's got to Champions League semi final with Emery before. He's obviously going to think highly of Emery. So, yeah, I think that kind of unique relationship puts us in a pretty good spot. But yeah, it depends on the caliber of team coming in for him because Bayern Munich obviously have more appeal
yeah,
than
I think
Aston Villa.
yeah. When you look at our squad and what we've got, um, well, actually, I don't know. Do you know what? If you ignore our squad and what we've got, and you just look at the players we've been linked with, he's like right now of what we've been linked with and what's available to us potentially. I think he would be my favourite player to come in. Just that
Yeah,
kind of centre back that not only is great defensively and adds a lot of confidence to the players around them, but really, really good at keeping hold of the ball, very press
yeah,
resistant.
it is
Starts to
exciting.
turn you into that side that is a more of a possession-based side and can
Yeah,
spring on a fast counter on a team um, as well. Like
yeah,
that does it sort of builds that sort of foundation of a great squad, especially when we've already got what's shaping up to be a great midfield. You then are just
yeah.
looking at a
Well,
backup right back and a left winger, and you've probably got strikers sorted if you keep Archer and maybe sign one more.
yeah. I mean, I've heard that right back and striker and winger are our main priorities.
I think you
I don't
have
know
to
how
bring in a left-sided centre back
true that
because
is. So
Chambers hasn't been at the level required. Emery, I don't think fancies him. That
no,
leaves us realistically with just Konza and Mings and Diego Carlos. Diego Carlos, while he can play on the left, ideally he plays on the right.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's interesting because he played on the left at Sevilla. But I don't know much about it. I'm assuming you assume when he's a right-footed player, you assume that there's some reason that the potentially they just had two right-footed
yeah, well, he
centre
was
back.
playing next to Kunde, who is now
Yeah,
playing right back for Barcelona. So
yeah. So he was probably just more adept of the two to play on the left. But yeah, you'd imagine he probably ideally plays on the right. Yeah, no, I think centre back will be a priority, but from what I've read, right back is also. I mean, right back also needs to be a big priority because we literally only have one, unless you
well,
play Conte there. But
yeah,
that's
that's the
not
thing.
ideal.
It could be an indication of where their priorities are in terms of they'd rather have more rotation centre backs, enabling them to play those centre
Maybe.
backs at right
Yeah.
back if need be,
I mean,
or even Mings at left back if need be.
yeah. Well, the
Um,
right back in our system that we played under Emery was a lot more reserved. Could definitely be played by Konza, really. But I don't know. I think if the money's there, I think Emery will want to sign a right back
yeah,
and a striker, definitely. But
I
yeah,
think
so
wing's more of a
speaking of the
priority. Yeah.
midfield, Tielemans apparently had an amazing game for uh, Belgium the other day.
Oh yeah. How do you do?
I don't
What
know.
did you do?
It might have just been a friendly, but I think he got man of the match, most touches of any player, most chances created of any player.
I'm scrolling back through
Um,
now. I'm gonna have a look. The 3-0,
was it a friendly
3-0
or
against
was it
Estonia.
a qualifier?
He did play.
Estonia,
Let's have
yeah,
a
that
look
was
at
it. Yeah,
yeah, one chance created, 87% pass accuracy. He didn't create any XG or expected assists really, but
uh,
successful dribble, one out of three
that doesn't sound amazing.
tackles, 6 out of 8 ground duels. I mean, he did get a good rating. Like I think he played that role of like a Kovacic or maybe a more reserved Gundogan quite well of just playing smart passes, moving the ball around the pitch well. You'd probably see, if you looked at an FB ref of that game, how many progressive passes he played was probably quite high. Uh, sort of progressive carries might have been quite high.
Yeah,
That sort of stuff. And again, they were playing Estonia.
yeah,
I mean, what was the possession? 67% possession. He wasn't going to need to do a lot of defensive work.
no,
He
I
was in
mean,
a system where they have two other midfielders, one who's basically a winger, and then three attackers ahead of
yeah,
him. So he didn't need
Carrasco.
to do a lot of attacking either. He's probably the most defensive out of those three that were on the pitch. So he was
Yeah, it's
playing more of a
interesting.
six role, I think.
Yeah, because because obviously he had a kind of a worse season at Leicester than his previous years this year. So then I was kind of wondering what his place in the Belgium team was, but he's played 90 minutes in their last two games, which is encouraging, I think, because they've got a lot of good players, and he's still obviously really highly regarded in the Belgian setup,
Yeah,
which probably tells you that his level's not actually dropped off. It was a kind of a club-wide issue at Leicester.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's encouraging that he's getting 90 minutes in that Belgian team.
yeah. Well, he also, to be fair, in the game before that, where they drew 1 with Austria, he created two chances. He hit the post from about 25 yards. He got 10 passes into the final third. What was his general pass accuracy? 71%, so he's playing a lot more forward, you'd expect. 1 out of 2 tackles won, 3 out of 6
Yeah, it
duels.
looks like they played a different system against Austria.
Yeah, they had another. They had two more midfielders in there where they were a little bit more defensive
Yeah,
than he is, I think, generally. So yeah, it's interesting. He's definitely versatile. He's been the central midfielder for both of those games. The central pivot of the whole midfield. So
yeah,
it's interesting that he's played there in 2-4-3-3s because, as I was saying before, if we had a system where we played Kamara, Douglas Luiz, and Tielemans as having Kamara the main sitting six, and then those two sort of hybrid eights that are basically both box to box, pushing back and forth. I think that could work really well, and that might be something Emery tries at points, especially when we want to sort of dominate the ball more. Because I think
yeah,
Dougie is a great creator. Tielemans can be if he gets in the right positions, moves the ball well. Dougie loves arriving late in the box as well. Tielemans can hit him from range. I think that's a really nice mix of a midfield that can sort of keep the
yeah,
ball and open up deep line blocks. So I'm interested to see what comes from that. To be fair.
yeah. I mean, it's midfield does look super strong for us now. If we get one or two wingers slash attackers, attacking midfielders in, the midfield is pretty stacked.
Yeah,
Um, it's
and then
good stuff. I think Ramsey is playing currently for the
yeah,
under
and if
21.
you put a winger out there and you want Ramsey on the pitch still, you want to be a bit more attacking or play on the counter a bit more. You
Yeah,
can
that's the thing.
switch
It
him
gives us
into an eight.
options.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of switching around can be done. A lot of versatile players.
maybe even
Um,
Buendia in that eight spot one day.
yeah, I'm sure he could do it. He's got like the defensive work rate to play at eight, definitely, and the sort of progressing the ball is very good at. I guess I don't know whether you'd worry about his sort of positionally, whether he'd be able to
Well, he likes to
hold
be
his.
between the lines, so I think he'd be the more attacking of the midfield three, and would sit back when we're under pressure as well.
Yeah,
I don't think he'd play much of that Tielemans role where he's just taking the ball in tight spaces and moving it on. But I don't
no,
think you need him to in that situation. I think he'd move up into sort of a hybrid 8-10 in an
yeah, no,
attacking
yeah,
situation.
could definitely
But
do that.
him being out wide, I hate because he never really does anything. He doesn't have the profile to be out wide at all. Um,
No,
and he's not
yeah, I
really
think
that kind of player who's going to cut in off the left either. So
no. He clearly works best sort of more centrally in tight spaces. I mean, in tight spaces, he's probably our best our best player. Like in terms of his
like turning on the defensive midfielder and playing it
yeah,
forward.
his agility, his ball control. He's probably our best player when we're kind of trying to quickly get the ball forward on a counter attack. Like his little touches when he gets the ball and he plays it first time with a little touch around the corner and stuff. He's really good at that kind of thing. But yeah, it does kind of get wasted when he plays out wide. So it's quite interesting actually, Buendia's role next season. Because I can't tell whether Emery liked him or not. He played every game under Emery, but I mean, he didn't perform amazingly well. Also didn't perform badly.
I started to get
Um,
frustrated with him in the final few games as well. There were quite a few times where he picked up the ball, had options to his right, to his left, and ahead of him, and just kept hold of it, and then
yeah,
eventually lost it, even though he had
yeah.
the space and the time to pass it.
He is one of them. He's like a kind of a weird player because he's really he within the space of one game he'll be really frustrating, but also our most creative player. Like he gets the ball so often, and every single time he gets the ball, he tries to make something happen. He very rarely just picks it up and plays it back to the centre back. Every time he gets the ball, he tries to make something happen. So in a game, he will probably progress the ball forward as much or more than any of our other attacking players, but at the same time, we'll lose the ball as much as any of our, or more than any of our attacking players. Like
Not as
it's
much as Bailey. Bailey is the most frustrating.
true. I mean, that goes without saying. I kind of, you know,
Yeah.
brushed over that. But yeah, he's sort of like within the space of one game, he'll create more chances than anyone and fuck up more obvious chances than anyone. Like it's really, he is a quite frustrating player.
Yeah.
He's inconsistent, like decision making, final balls sometimes are inconsistent, which is annoying. But yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to predict because we're signing wingers and we're signing a striker, possibly someone who can play that second striker role that he was kind of playing. So you're wondering, is he just going to get kind of phased out? Is he just going to be used as a sub? I can't imagine he'd be that happy with that, having been our record signing. And in the years of his career where he needs to be he'll want to be playing football. So it's kind of interesting because unless he does transition into a midfield role, based on the signings that we're supposedly making, like you don't really see much of a place for him in the team currently.
Yeah, he's going
Um,
to end up being that utility attacking player that just sort of fills it
yeah,
in potentially
which is
because he
fine
doesn't
because
have like a specialist role, does he?
no,
He has an
not really.
amalgamation of interesting traits that could suit him in a couple of different roles, but just
Yeah,
haven't quite worked out yet.
no, he's a weird player. He's one of them where, like you say, he's got loads of useful traits, loads of good traits, and quite unique traits that a lot of players on the team don't have at all. But they're not the kind of traits that you really trust a starting player to have. He is a good option off the bench. I'm very happy with him coming off the bench, but I can't see him being happy with it. So it's interesting what will happen with Buendia.
Yeah, I think Emery, what he needs to do in pre-season is really consolidate his position, tell him exactly what he wants from him in each game.
Yeah,
Who are his targets to try and hit? When does he want to try and hit them? What does he want him to do when he receives the ball in certain situations? And
yeah,
then I think you might see Buendia thrive a bit. I think the ambiguity of his position being that kind of right-sided second striker, number 10 hybrid, that also would then sometimes be put out wide and in midfield, just kind of confused him a bit in the sense of not that he's like
yeah.
stupid, but from a playing
I mean,
sense, like not doing the same thing and having the same role in the set
yeah.
team every
If your
game.
role's changing a lot, like it does make things difficult for you as a player. So yeah, no, I agree. I mean, if any manager is going to be good at that, then it will be Emery. Like from what you hear from players, he's majorly detail obsessed, and he tells players exactly what their role is very clearly. Like, did you read or see the Tyrone Mings interview where Mings said that Emery basically came in and told him that he'd been doing everything wrong his whole career. He'd been playing centre back the wrong way because Mings had sort of too much responsibility in terms of progressing the ball and too much responsibility in terms of organising the defence. And Emery said to him basically, "Don't worry about the other defenders. Like, trust them to do their jobs. Don't worry about organising them. Don't worry about being the main responsibility in terms of bringing the ball out the back because you've got midfielders for that. You've got your other centre back for that." He basically said, "Stick to your position, do the basic stuff." And obviously, Mings played really well the last half of the season, so it's kind of interesting. He came in and told this really experienced centre back that he'd been doing everything wrong and he'd been focused on the wrong things. But yeah, it seems like Emery's a major detail obsessed, like rigid, structured kind of thing. So yeah, hopefully he gets the best out of Buendia.
Yeah,
Like his work rate is so good. He's like really tenacious, and he's obviously got loads of good qualities. Like I want him to to figure out his role and thrive. Because even though he's been a good player for us, I think generally he has been inconsistent, and he's not really hit the heights that people were hoping from him. It's pretty fair to say. So
Yeah,
yeah, I hope he comes into his own a bit more.
yeah, that's pretty much what I think most Villa fans would echo. I guess.
Yeah.
But shall we talk a little bit about football around the world? A little bit of
Yeah, I
well,
mean, I think we should quickly give our opinions on the kits since they've
oh yeah,
come
of
out.
course, yeah. There's a lot of Villa stuff we haven't covered yet. I think if you strip the sponsors off, I think I'd like the kit. But with the sponsors on there, more so the colours of the sponsors, not necessarily
Yeah,
the
that's
sponsors
the
who
one
they
thing
are.
that's
So
standing
maybe
out
there's a
for me is the
contentious issue there as well. But just purely about the look of the sponsors on the shirt, I don't like it.
damn.
I like the design overall, and I like obviously the colours. I just think the way the sponsors are the highlight of the shirt and how they have multiple colours on there that completely don't match the shirt at all, it just doesn't fit at all.
Interesting, because I'm kind of a fan.
Are you? Even with the
Yeah,
sponsors?
I mean, I don't love the sponsor, but sponsors are always on shirts, and they always make the shirt look shitter. And I don't think it's massively distracting, to be honest. I mean, I agree. I'd rather it wasn't there, and it kind of depends on what photo you look at, because some photos I'm seeing it, and the eight, the color of the eight
Yeah,
is kind of the same gold as the writing on the badge, and in those photos, I'm thinking the color looks fine, but then on the official store, the eight looks really orange and looks really crap. Um,
yeah. That's the main thing for me is the eight being orange. I think if the BK8 was all white, I wouldn't be as fussed.
yeah, but I
But also
mean,
the shoulder thing as well. The fact that that's like all just looks completely out of place.
what the sponsor on the
Yeah, Trade Nation.
yeah.
That just looks
Um,
shit as
yeah,
well, in my opinion.
they are the sponsors are annoying, but I don't know. I just kind of ignore them on shirts really because they're always shit. I don't think these sponsors are any more significantly shit than they usually look. That's excluding the fact that one of them's a betting company and one of them seems to be some sort of broker, online broker. So two
Yeah,
shady fucking sponsors, to be honest. Which is disappointing. But no, in terms of visuals, I really like it. I think the main thing is the color. The color is really nice. Um, it's funny how the shade of claret seems to change every year, but I think this one is one of the most spot on. It's quite a classic design, simple design, which I always like on shirts.
yeah. I'm
Even
looking
the
at it now.
shorts. I mean, the badge does look really cool on the shorts. To be honest, the
I
new
think the
badge.
shoulders look good. The badge, I'm not. Uh, I think I don't know why there's light blue around the edge of the badge. I think maybe. I suppose it probably doesn't look
Yeah,
good
I don't know.
without that. It's just that BK8 man. I just don't like it.
I'm gonna send you a link to this photo because you'll see in this photo, I think the color of the eight looks okay because it seems to match.
Okay, let's
It's
have a
more of a
look.
goldy yellow, and it seems to match the writing on the badge, and it doesn't look terrible. But then you actually click on that photo, and it takes you to a link to the shop, and the eight looks bright orange. It's really weird.
Yeah, I suppose in that picture it doesn't look awful necessarily, but
Yeah, it looks more yellow.
yeah, as soon as you go to the shop, it's so overpriced as well. Jesus Christ!
Yeah, pretty mad, isn't it?
I think the back looks good. I like the back.
Yeah, I think I just I like classic designs, simple designs.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think if you ignore the sponsors, I think the shirt is generally at least a good 6.57 out of 10 at least. But with the
yeah,
sponsors on there, just because like last year's kit, even with the sponsor, I think's a really nice kit, like 7.5, 8 out of 10.
really.
But
Let me get last year's. What was last year? 22, 23.
yeah,
I think I prefer the new one. Ooh, do I? I mean, last year's was actually a really good kit as well. Really liked the away kit last year. I'm excited for the away kit this year.
I think it
Um,
wasn't too exciting a design. It was just for me the
well, I don't
colours
think it
all
needs to
worked
be.
well.
Yeah, that's all you
Like
need.
yeah,
Probably my favorite Villa kit in my lifetime, in the years that I've been watching Villa, is the Acorns kit, the Martin O'Neill era, where it was.
oh yeah,
I mean, that was a really simple design, kind of similar to our kit last season, where it was just claret, blue sleeves, basically it, and then Acorn sponsor, which is obviously really nice. But yeah, you don't. I think it's maybe the colours of Villa's colours or what, I don't know, lends itself to classic symbol kits, which this year's is, last year's was. I would definitely prefer the colours of the new release to last season.
yeah.
Definitely. Um, I think I'd probably prefer the new kit to last year's.
I think the kit with if you put Kazoo on that kit and took the shoulder sponsor off, I think I'd probably
Yeah,
agree. But
yeah,
here we are. Anyway, shall we talk about football across the continent and maybe the world?
sure.
Let's go with the
um,
obvious. Jude Bellingham.
oh yeah.
How do you feel?
I'm excited for him. To be fair, I think probably not enough English players go to big European clubs. Doesn't happen very often. I'm kind of, in a way, it would be really exciting to see him in the Premier League, obviously, but I'm kind of excited that he's at Real Madrid. That like he'll be, he's almost guaranteed a Champions League semi-final at Real Madrid.
Yeah,
He'll be on the biggest stage. I mean, he's in an insane midfield, man.
yeah. I mean, it
Um,
depends how they go about blooding him in. Because if they don't give him much game time, like they didn't with Aurelian Tchouameni, I could see because you've got like some Newcastle and I think one other club looking to make bids for Tchouameni this season because he
mm,
hasn't had much game time and they think they could pull him away. Camavinga as well has played in positions you wouldn't really expect.
but he's played most of the season at left back, hasn't he?
Well,
Or
I
at
wouldn't
least the
say it
second
was
half
most
of
of the
the
season,
season.
but yeah, some portion of the season at left back, which is just quite weird.
I mean, he played really well there. It just seems like
Yeah,
maybe a bit of a waste.
I don't know. Has Modric extended for another year? Or is he?
I don't know actually, but I haven't heard anything about him
I know
leaving.
Cruz has extended for another year.
Yeah, I
Um,
imagine. I feel like Modric probably is probably.
I think they've got to give Jude
Oh no,
Bellingham time over those guys at least.
yeah, they will. I think he's good enough. He's a massive signing. They paid loads of money for him. He's a massive
Paid
name.
loads of money for Germany.
Um, well, they did, yeah, and maybe it seems like a bigger signing from an English perspective because in our media we see everyone's obsessed with Jude Bellingham. Maybe you don't get that. Maybe Spanish people or German people don't get a sense of it being such a big signing because they don't see so much of him in their media. But
Well, they would in Germany.
yeah, um, I don't know. I think he will get plenty of game time. I think he's good enough to cement his place in there. I think he will.
Do you think he wins a Ballon d'Or one day?
I don't know. It's interesting because I'm on BBC Sport and there's an article who's winning the 2024 Ballon d'Or. They've got Haaland, Bellingham, Vinicius, and Mbappe.
I don't think he
Um,
wins it next season. I think with
no,
Mbappe, Haaland playing the way they are, I think Vinicius playing the way he is, unless Jude comes into that side and plays a
yeah,
more
unless he kills it.
forward-thinking role and absolutely smashes it, I don't think he stands a chance for Ballon d'Or. Unless,
No, me
like,
neither.
is there an international competition next year? Is there a Euros? No. Yeah,
No, not next year. Oh yeah, it will be
it should
20
be
Euro
Euro.
24. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, if he wins the Euros with England, wins the Champions League with Real Madrid next year, and plays a
Yeah,
huge
maybe.
role, maybe. But generally, the Ballon d'Or are looking less at team achievements. They've said, and
Yeah,
more in the upcoming years
yeah.
on
It's harder
individual.
for midfielders, especially not strictly attacking midfielders, to win that kind of award, isn't it?
But he
Um,
might end up doing
winning it.
that, Real.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I could see him winning at some point next year. Maybe too early
Yeah,
for him,
because
but
if
you
you
never know.
think about a midfield
It's
post
possible.
Kroos and Modric, they could end up
Yeah.
playing a Chouameni sitting deep with a Camavinga and having Bellingham in a 10 role. Equally, they could have that pretty much any three of those players playing in any one of those roles, but you'd prefer
Mm,
Bellingham further forward.
yeah. Um, yeah. No. I just read something about Modric. Modric hasn't officially signed a contract, but
Okay.
they said that there's an agreement. So maybe he's still deciding. Like there's an agreement there if he wants it. Seems like he likely will sign on for another year. So
I think for him, he must be tired. You know, he really dropped off towards the end of last season. I
yeah.
think just
Well, I
go
think that's
go
why
make some easy
probably
money in Saudi Arabia,
Bellingham's
mate.
probably good for him. Maybe I mean, he obviously he's going to be a super competitive guy, isn't he? And if he thinks he's still good enough to play some kind of role, I feel like he'd rather play a role at Real Madrid than go to Saudi Arabia. And maybe he's looking at the Bellingham signing, thinking this guy's going to soak up most of my minutes, but like in a good way, in a way that allows him to have a role off the bench. Because I think last season they were quite thin, weren't they? The squad was quite thin. They weren't having such a good season. Modric probably felt like he had a lot of responsibility, but maybe didn't have the physicality to actually take on that responsibility fully. Um,
Yeah,
in terms of game time and in terms of big performances. So I reckon he's probably looking at the Bellingham signing, thinking, "This is good for me. It's going to improve the team. It means I can sit back a little bit, but still play a role." And it's good for Bellingham. Like this is why I think it's exciting that he's going to Real Madrid because I think for England, it's good that our key players are getting experiences in other leagues. Like he's
yeah, I
learning
suppose.
from
Yeah,
amazing midfielders, and he's going to be playing in sort of slightly different systems, playing against different types of teams to what he would in England. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's good that he's gone to a. I think it's obviously easy for English players to stay in the Premier League because it's the most competitive league and there's the most money there. Um, but I think it's a good thing when English players go elsewhere.
yeah, no, for sure. I think so as well. It especially sort of introduces new philosophies and ways of playing because
Yeah, that's the
I
thing.
still think
He'll
even
learn
though
stuff that he wouldn't in England.
yeah, even in the Premier League, still I feel like we still see a lack of, even with the talent we have in terms of like Phil Foden and Saka, we still see somewhat of a lack of flair from those players, a lack of
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It doesn't, even though we've
um,
got like these players are managed by Guardiola, etc. But then it doesn't translate to the English national team. I mean, I guess that's maybe just the coaching of the national team, but yeah, I agree. Like you don't see, Saka has had an amazing season. He's obviously a great player, but he's not doesn't have that flair that maybe you'd expect.
yeah, he doesn't tend to be like that all-out attacking, get the ball and go forward every time
No,
like some
he's quite
players
sort of
are, like
direct
Vinicius
and
is.
practical.
Yeah, he'll often turn back on himself and play the ball back. It's because England in the UK, obviously keeping the ball and setting things up properly is very important because you get
Mm,
very few chances, and those chances you have to put the ball in the net. Um, the kind of philosophy around football, although it's moved on from a classic 4-4-2 and hoof it up the pitch, it still seems a little conservative compared to some places where
yeah,
players will be a little more creative at times and flary across
I
Europe,
mean,
and then
it's like
that's why when you see them come to the league, they tend to have a drop off.
yeah, it's if you think about Real Madrid when they won the Champions League last year, and the way they did it, I feel like you'd never see an English team win a tournament in that way because if an English team played in that way, kind of basically relying on the key players to create things, sitting back and counter-attacking and just relying on being clinical in the counter-attack, allowing the attacking players loads and loads of freedom. Um, I feel like if an English team played in that way in the league, they just maybe wouldn't be successful. And so, yeah, I think other leagues allow for a different kind of philosophy that's maybe a bit freer in attack, a bit more flair based, a bit more individual in terms of attacking. Which,
A bit more expressive.
yeah, expressive. That's the word. Yeah, I don't think in a league dominated by Klopp and Guardiola, I can't see across a 38 game league competition a Real Madrid style of play really working in England. So
Yeah,
um,
because if you think about it, even Guardiola's team, when they play really nice football and score a lot of goals, you still don't really see that kind of tiki taka that you used to see
no, it's really structured.
in La Liga.
It's
Yeah, it's
really
so
structured.
structured, and it's a lot relies on crosses, balls across the box,
Yeah,
slow movement of the football, looking for openings.
yeah,
Like yeah, you just don't really see it anymore. Like the Arsenal of old that would have Jack Wilshere and bloody Olivier Giroud
no,
flicking the ball on
yeah,
tiki taka through Norwich's defence. Everyone is just bamboozled. That never really happens that much.
no,
Um,
no. It's weird. Um,
Even though there's plenty of players with the skill and the ability to do it.
yeah, yeah. It's hard to pin down like what it is about it, about England, about the English league that kind of causes that to happen. But I don't know. But yeah, I mean, if you look at Grealish, Grealish is a really good example of. I mean, one of the most flary kind of players out there, really, isn't he? He just
No,
loves.
not. I don't think in terms of his ability to pull out some kind of trick or move that gets him
You
past
know,
a
not in terms of
defender.
tricks, but
In
in
terms
terms of
of like
the way he
taking
expresses
players on.
himself. Yeah, the way he expresses himself on the pitch, he basically loves having the ball at his feet. He wants the freedom and creativity to kind of take the ball, take that responsibility, and move it forward. That was his role at Villa, and that's why everyone was so excited by him at Villa, is because he was just an amazing dribbler, and he was very expressive. Um, but it kind of like all got killed at City a little bit, and then he's come
Yeah,
into his own more this
yeah,
season.
he still
But
progresses the ball. He still keeps it a lot, but you don't really see him take on players anymore.
no,
Every time I
no, he
watch
does it in
him,
a very regimented way now.
yeah, it's sort of he comes down the outside, maybe he cuts back inside, he gives the defender something to think about, and usually picks another option. He very rarely actually takes on that man
No,
and gets a ball in the box.
no, like it doesn't feel like he's expressing himself on the pitch. You know, like if Grealish played at Real Madrid, he'd play out on the left. He'd be sometimes in big games if they were sitting back, he'd have absolutely acres of space, um, and he'd pick up the ball and he'd probably just have the freedom to do whatever he wanted with it. He'd run into the middle, he'd take on players, he'd wait for a run to appear, he'd draw a free kick, whatever. But yeah, his role at City, he still plays out wide on the left, but it's like it's really compact at City, so he's often just playing. He's creating a bit of space and playing a short pass.
Yeah.
Like he's cutting inside, creating a little bit of space around the outside, and then he's playing the ball. Um, it's very structured, very regimented.
Well, he's not very structured and regimented off the field, as we've seen.
No, it's so funny.
Or is
You
it
see that
the
picture of carrying him out of the
yeah,
hotel or something?
the
Oh, God.
turkey needs feeding?
Yeah,
Picks up a bottle of vodka. Feed
yeah.
me! Crikey,
Um,
he's a
it's
character,
crazy.
isn't he?
Yeah,
Um,
you gotta love him, really, haven't you?
yeah. What about Saudi Arabia? Right, I think just in the last day or two, it's been confirmed essentially that Ziyech, Koulibaly, and the keeper at Chelsea. What's his name again? The Senegalese keeper.
Oh, Mendy.
Yeah, Edouard Mendy. All three of those are on the verge of
Oh, really? Didn't
signing
know.
for various Saudi Arabian teams. Apparently, Ruben Neves has agreed a
Yeah,
deal
I've
to
heard
go
that.
there. What's
Yeah.
going on? Do you think this, like, I think we might have discussed this before, do you think it really has any backing, like, validity behind it? Because you know
Uh,
UEFA and people like that are going to have no way of controlling this.
no, and no desire
Saudi
to
aren't
put it in.
themselves aren't going to be like, oh no, you have to put that much money into developing Saudi players too, like they did in China.
No.
You know, it's just going to keep going. Does it
Yeah.
become a viable, watchable league at some point, or do you think
I
it's going
really
to be
hope
another
not.
flash in the pan?
I really hope it's another flash in the pan.
Because the money they're putting forward is insane. That's why we're seeing all
Yeah.
these players go there. Because it's not like it was at China where it was like, oh, you can get really good money and go play in China. It's like you can get generational, life-changing money
Mm.
for like your grandkids and their kids, like
Yeah.
for
Um,
2 years of playing football in a nice hot country,
yeah.
albeit there might be some not so nice things that happen in that country.
I think realistically, I can't really imagine it ever becoming more than like a retirement destination for 35-year-old players.
Ruben
Uh,
Neves,
I mean,
same
yeah,
thing. That money could tempt anyone, no matter their age.
yeah, it will. But like, we did have a similar thing happen in China, and that was a flash in the pan. Like because of the regulation, like we have talked about that before.
But I don't think
Um,
we'll see that regulation come in at Saudi.
no,
That's
but
why
I
I'm
just think
kind of concerned a little bit.
I don't know. I just think I like to have faith in the fact that Europe and the Americas have these kind of historic traditions that I like to think players will value. Um, and while Saudi Arabia might become a kind of globally watchable league because they'll have loads of good players, uh, English people will always prioritize the Premier League and probably Europe over watching Saudi Arabia. Same goes for, I imagine, most European countries. They're going to prioritize their own leagues and probably European competitions. Um, so while I think it might grow, I mean, it will grow. Um, it might eventually become an interesting league if it really does get full of good players and they kind of create academies and then it has keeps creating new players and new whatever maybe. But I don't know. I can't see it. I like to basically have faith in the fact that most players will want to compete in the biggest competitions, the competitions with the most history and tradition, the most gravitas.
You sound like a Tory.
Yeah, history and tradition. But it's true though, right? Like history and tradition
Yeah,
give a competition credibility, right? And I think if a player in the peak of their career, so they want to be as successful as possible, they go to Saudi Arabia, win a load of crap in Saudi Arabia that nobody really thinks is that credible because they're brand new
yeah,
and the competition's not as rigorous. That player's career is not going to be held in high esteem in the same way that somebody who
yeah.
plays and wins the Champions League
I
is going to be.
think the most interesting point you made there is about academies. If they bring infrastructure in,
Yeah,
where
that's the thing as well.
players are
Like,
developed and academies are set up around the world, whether they be in Asia, Africa, potentially even Europe, I think you might start to find it a destination for younger players to sort of put their name out there, get some exposure alongside some of these big names that are brought in, and then bought by potentially European clubs, or at least maybe they run out their contracts and then move to
yeah,
Europe, something like that. Now, I think that eventually could be something that happens if they do bring some sort of infrastructure in there. But
yeah,
if
yeah.
it stays as a top heavy thing where you just keep bringing in these big names and then they
That's the
retire,
thing. They can't do that
you
forever,
know,
can they? They can't just.
well,
They
I mean, if
can't.
you've seen how much money they've got, they probably
Yeah,
could.
I mean, they theoretically could, but then they're not going to. That you can't sustain a league on just constantly buying players from everywhere else. They will have to build loads of infrastructure. I could see it happening. I mean, I was reading actually something interesting that Saudi Arabia has quite a strong footballing tradition anyway, and their national team has got to 6 of the last 8 World Cups. Um,
Yeah, they do. I mean, to be fair, there is some there. There is some history there.
yeah, their all of their national players play in Saudi Arabian teams. Um, so there's kind of seems like there is like a fairly strong culture there, football culture. So presumably there's some kind of infrastructure in place already.
Yeah,
But yeah, they will if they're serious about it being a footballing competition rather than a kind of marketing ploy to get people to watch games with like Messi and Ronaldo. If they're serious about it being an established competition where players want to come and play football for the sake of football rather than for the sake of money, then they will need loads and loads of infrastructure. Um,
yeah. They'll need big
so it's
stadiums. They'll need fans. Importantly, I think you'll
yeah,
struggle to get the fans and the atmosphere that perhaps you'd get.
yeah. It's
Um,
just it's hard to predict how invested they are in that. It's impossible to know whether they are actually interested in developing their football culture to the point where they've got academies, loads of infrastructure, filling out big stadiums, blah blah blah, or whether they're part of me just thinks that they're getting all these players in just to get international viewing figures. Do you know what I mean? Just to for a bit of money and to they. I mean, it's called
Perhaps for
sports
their
washing. You know, for their
yeah,
reputation.
for their reputation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to know, really. I think at the moment I'm probably erring on the side of they're just doing it for their reputation, and that's why they're going after big names and stuff. In that case, I can't see it lasting, but there's a possibility that if they, invested in infrastructure and stuff, then it does become a
Yeah.
genuine
I
viable
think
thing.
one part of it that could actually work quite well is around the world you see a lot of sort of countries in the East and Muslim countries tend to have like big followings for some of the main teams like PSG and Man City and things like that.
Yeah.
You often see them with those kind of shirts on in like social media, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, with a player like Benzema, who is a Muslim man himself, bringing himself to that kind of league, providing this kind of like figurehead sportsman, kind of role model, like someone to look up to for those communities, could bring a lot of eyes that would otherwise be potentially on different leagues and sort of European
Yeah.
leagues where they don't have that local connection and that sort of ties to the history and the authenticity of it. That could bring a lot of those eyes into that league, and it
True.
might feel more authentic for them having somewhere
Yeah,
closer to
maybe.
home.
Yeah, maybe if they prioritize those elements of their culture, of their God, scared. Um, yeah, if they prioritize like unique elements of their culture, then that'd be cool. I'd like that. I'd like them to invest to kind of delve into their cultural traditions and stuff and make it their own thing. Like at the moment, it feels annoying because they're just taking European football and like trying to get in on it, um,
Yeah.
just from a kind of a purely kind of marketing perspective. Like, but if they did their own thing with it, then that'd be cool. But
I
I don't
mean, a
know the
lot of
way that
players they've taken do have roots in Asia and Africa, that sort of thing. With, Benzema having his Muslim roots. You've got Ziyech, who's Moroccan. You've got Edouard
Kante.
Mendy and Kante, both of African origins. Um, that sort of thing. Like it doesn't scream of taking just a dip into Europe and trying to sort of emulate that in a way. It does seem like there's maybe some kind of idea like that. They're
Maybe.
trying to
Yeah.
keep it within sort of a culture that and a type of person and player that mostly would appeal to their own culture and people and communities that could really inspire them rather than just taking the biggest names possible. Obviously, Ronaldo is a huge one, but that when you've got the
Yeah.
opportunity to bring Ronaldo to your league, like
Yeah.
that does kind of speak for itself rather than where he's from and what kind of person he is, what his beliefs are. That doesn't really come into it at that stage, when you're talking
Yeah.
about a potentially, top three, if not two, or well, I wouldn't say he's the best player ever, but he's up there in the top three at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That would be. I'd be more behind the whole Saudi Arabia thing if they were developing their own kind of cultural traditions. I feel like that's a good thing for the country of Saudi Arabia, for their football culture to be strongly tied to their cultural values in general, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I feel like that's just a good thing to happen
yeah.
as
Like
opposed to
if
importing
if our
European culture.
if our football as it is now in the last 20 years had been completely taken over by American billionaires and brought up and marketed, and the infrastructure of the
Yeah,
leagues and the clubs and the sort of directors and things like that, if that had all been very Americanized, we wouldn't hold much of an affinity with it anymore.
no,
Like people
yeah,
would still watch it, but it would feel very plasticky. It would feel very.
yeah,
This is just a product now that we're sold. Not
yeah,
this is my club that I love
yeah, yeah,
since I was a kid that I support. And we're going out there and trying to conquer the world. It'd be more. Oh, okay. Now it's just a product that someone's trying to grow. Like it's
yeah,
just yeah. It just changes it a bit.
yeah. Um, I think I've got to go in about 5 minutes, but what could we talk about quickly?
Newcastle bid for Tonali. They're offering to double his
Oh
wages. I think
shit,
it's like a
yeah,
70 million bid. They're
that
gonna
would be
leave
scary,
us
man.
behind.
Yeah, I don't want that. That would be
although,
fucking.
although at one time you would have said Tielemans was a 50 plus million pound midfielder.
Yeah, well, I think.
Dougie at the moment is. Kamara
Yeah,
probably will be soon.
well, I think I remember Arsenal going after Tielemans for 50 million or something the year after they finished fifth and won the FA Cup or something. Leicester. So, uh, yeah, yeah, no, true. I do think honestly, especially with the Tielemans addition, currently our midfield is stronger than Newcastle's. Tonali will obviously make it a lot better, but I think I'd still back our midfield. I'd still say it's kind of on a similar level, even with Tonali in there. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I'd say Tonali from a playmaking point of view is probably similar level to Tielemans, but he's got a little bit more to his game, I think, overall. But
yeah,
then to look at it from a point of view of each individual player and are they better than their counterpart, I think Dougie's better than Guimaraes. I think Camara's better than Guimaraes in a six role. If you were to bring Guimaraes into a purely six
yeah,
role, and otherwise if you see him as more of an eight, I think Dougie's better. Um, and then Kamara's obviously better than any DM they've got because they don't have a DM. And then Tielemans is
yeah,
obviously a very high quality player. Still, it's yet to be seen whether he'll pick up again this year after dropping off a little bit at Leicester. Possibly, the knowledge that he was always going to leave is partly to do with that.
yeah.
If he picks things up again and really
I
plays a
think we
big
can
part in this system,
fairly
then
safely assume that he will. To be honest, he's playing
yeah,
under a great manager who has done a brilliant job so far. Has basically improved every one of our players. He's not lost his place in the Belgium squad, like we said. So I think you can safely assume that he'll improve at least on his level from last year. So
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, Brendan Rodgers, with everything he's done, he's not an elite manager. He's a very good manager. He's done good things, but
yeah, of
he's not
course.
achieved anything of real note across his career, other than sort of
Not.
stabilisation of decent sides. Like
I
he
mean,
didn't,
he did
he
very well
didn't
at
win.
Celtic, but
Yeah, but
it's
Celtic's a
Celtic.
different kind of story. It's you're
Yeah,
expected to win league titles there, especially when your biggest rivals are like three divisions down in
yeah,
financial ruin.
yeah,
And obviously didn't win any European trophies under him. So Emery's certainly a step or two steps above what Brendan Rodgers was as a manager, and certainly a
yeah.
much nicer bloke. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Tielemans step it up.
Yeah,
Very
no,
much in
I
that
think we can
role.
safely assume that he will at least, at the very, very least, improve on his last year's performance at Leicester. Whether he picks up from Leicester when they finished fifth, that might be his level, which in that case is a very high level. Whether he'll improve on that, I don't know, but
Well, I
yeah,
think that
Tielemans will be
first
fine.
season where Tielemans was on loan at Leicester from Monaco was probably his best because I think he got something like 7 or 8 goal involvements in like 15 games or something like that. That
Yeah,
was the best of Tielemans we saw. If we can get that
but
kind of
he's
production out of him,
played quite a few different roles, hasn't he?
yeah,
Because he is very versatile. So he's maybe one of those players that gets shifted around a lot, or as Leicester change their system, he kind of fits into any role. Um, but yeah, it seems like he's most productive when he's given a bit more freedom to go forward because his progressive passing and his range of passing, his vision, stuff like that, are arguably his best qualities, his technique.
yeah,
Um, so it seems like he thrives more. Like when he first came on loan to at Leicester and played more of an attacking role. It seems like he thrives in that role most. So it'll be interesting if we can try and fit him in there. I don't see why not.
yeah, absolutely.
There's no reason we can't play him further forward, really,
Any
especially
other
with
interesting?
Kamara.
I don't want to talk about Rice or Caicedo because that's all everyone bloody talks about. I can't be asked. Any other interesting signings to bring up?
Well, Gundogan's gone to Barca, which is
Yeah, just saw that. Yeah.
not really much to talk about there, is
Well,
there?
I think there is the fact that Barca now have Frankie, Kessié, Pedri, Gavi, Gonzalez, Torre, and now Gundogan, and I'm sure I'm missing a name or two there, of players that all prefer some kind of forward uh, first thinking role. Obviously,
Yeah,
Kessié, De Jong, Gonzalez all have the ability to play in that sitting two, but they're more of a forward-thinking player. Um, so it is really interesting to see they've got to offload some of them players surely because they can't all get game
Yeah, you
time.
think so? I mean, and
Um,
Busquets has just retired as well, hasn't he?
yeah, so
Uh,
there has to be
yeah,
some movement there for sure. Like they need PMs. They can't just play a bunch of those guys. I mean, maybe you could get away with De Jong and Kessier with someone in front, but then you're essentially
yeah. I think depending on the
rotating
system, it can work.
five, six players in that
Yeah,
forward position.
no, yeah. Presumably they'll balance out with someone. I think it can work. Like you don't have to play with a dedicated defensive midfielder. You can play two kind of number eight-ish players who are both fine at defending, depending on your system.
But
But
still,
like
there's
you
still
say,
too many players.
the rotation thing is the problem, really. Like they must
Perhaps we could
expect
pick someone up.
some of them to, yeah.
Pablo Torre, maybe. I think that's his name.
Frankie De Jong, please.
Yeah, right. Gavi, more like. Go on, give us Gavi or
Oh, shit.
Pedri. Yeah, if you've got
Uh,
to go, let's we can wind this
yeah,
up.
I've got to
But
go. Although I should just say that fucking go away. Jacob Ramsey has just scored for the England under 21s.
oh yeah, I'm gonna definitely watch those highlights.
Yeah,
Hopefully Cam Archer gets some involvement too. But yeah,
yeah, he's on the bench.
for everyone who's been watching, I think this is Footballocks episode or Football Ox episode 4. Is it episode 4? I think it is.
Yeah, something like that.
4 or 5.
3 or 4.
Anyway,
Yeah.
follow, subscribe, like all that great stuff. Yeah, we're off. See ya.
See ya.